Hi, I'm Shay Oliver. Welcome to the Priority Paradigm. I'm sharing stories of amazing people who have made radical changes in their lives for something more important. And today I'm joined by Nate Regier, and he has a wonderful story to tell us. So without further ado, Nate, tell us your story.
Shay, it's great to be with you and great to be with your audience.
Thank you.
Sometimes I feel humbled when someone asks me to tell my story, and yet kind of like my dad used to say. He would say, "The older I get, the smarter my parents get." And sometimes I look back and think, "Wow, so many things were put in motion from way early on that I'm only starting to realize now. I'm 51 years old." Um, I would say the first probably defining moment of my story, I was 7 years old, and I'm in a small village in Zaire, Africa, which is now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo. And my parents were missionaries with the Mennonite Church. They weren't there in Africa to do preaching and that kind of thing. They were there for agriculture. My father had his master's in animal husbandry
Oh,
back in the day, and he was there helping teach local people how to grow rabbits, which was a really cool sustainable protein source in a part of Africa, tropical Africa, where starch was really high and low protein, and it was very difficult for people to afford it. Really cool stuff going on.
yeah.
Anyways, we're really embedded in the culture in the village and everything. And one night I had gone to bed, and after a typical evening where we're sitting around a fire out in the backyard, visiting with people from the community, elders, chiefs had been there, and I was woken up about 2 a.m. in the morning with a bright light outside my picture window. And I looked outside, and what had been a little pile of embers when I went to bed was now a blazing inferno, and I could see silhouettes of two people walking around the fire, and one of them was throwing wicker chairs into the fire,
Oh my God.
blazing the inferno. And I was really scared, 7 years old, but immediately I recognized one of the people was what they would have called back then the town demon possessed person. Every
Oh,
village has the person that's crazy. Now I know he probably had paranoid schizophrenia, but the other person was my father. And I watched as my father interacted with this gentleman, eventually calming him down, connecting with him, having a conversation. And within about 10 minutes, the two of them were sitting in the only remaining two chairs having a conversation while the fire died down.
wow.
That day, I realized my father had a special gift, and I wanted to be able to deal with people in those really intense situations where it could have escalated and become very violent,
Yeah.
but instead it turned into something that actually brought them closer together.
Wow.
Yeah. So fast forward, I ended up going to a small liberal arts college in Newton, Kansas. I was going to be a business major and make a lot of money, and I changed my major on the spot when I purchased the Economics 3 textbook, and it was about this thick, and it had a floppy disk attached, a big 5.5-inch floppy disk. Remember those?
Oh yeah.
And I got scared, and I didn't think I could do it. So I switched my major to psychology, and ended up really finding my passion and learning that understanding people and why they did what they did, and was really my passion. Went on to get a doctorate in clinical psychology and practice psychology and work with very difficult patients in inpatient addictions treatment. Um, but I wasn't happy. I was good
Hmm.
at it, but I wasn't happy. And I wonder how many of your other stories of people you've talked to is there's a difference between being able to do something well and being passionate. And so I did good. I excelled. I had different positions. I was even vice president at one time, but there was something missing. And people kept asking me, "Are you going to be a missionary like your parents, or you should go start your own company?" And just kept thinking they knew what I should do. But one day in the summer of 2008, me and three other people were just visiting about what we believed in, what our passion was, and we just decided we're going to leave everything and go start a company where we could leverage all the skills and perspectives that we had brought, try to help leaders live a more authentic life by learning how to communicate and deal with conflict better. And we just dropped everything. We quit our jobs, and the next day, um, well, not quite the next day, but we're in my basement making phone calls in our pajamas, basically saying, what do we have to do to survive and pay the bills? And come to realize 3 months later that the recession was officially announced. So October of 2008 was the biggest recession in any of us had ever experienced. So the first thing every company cuts in a recession is training budgets,
Yeah.
which was our profession. So here's little next element with people that had stars in their eyes, believing they could go change the world, and nobody wanted to pay for it. Um,
Oh,
and so we were facing quite a crisis.
no doubt.
And yeah, and we knew, and so we tried to go to banks to get loans, and nobody would loan us any money because we had no history. We had no, and we were unwilling to put up our homes and our IRAs on collateral. We figured the only choice we have is to deliver such great value and build such strong relationships that people are willing to pay and people are willing to refer. Um, and so we just got down to business and we were scrappy and we made it through that first year. We were profitable the second year, and by the fifth year, we we had more business than we could handle, and we decided to change our business paradigm. But during those 5 years, 90% of our business was referral only. We didn't really market. We had a decent website and some nice promotional materials, but for the most part, we just did the only thing we knew how to do, which was live our tools, be authentic to who we were, and try to make a difference in people's lives as fast as possible. Um,
Nice.
and our company's changed a lot. We're growing. We now are a distributor for two different training systems and models, and we certify trainers around the world and support them because we have a big vision for changing the world. But my father's passed away now. My mom's still alive, and several people in my family have said, Nate, I think you found your calling. I
Mm-hmm.
think I think you're the missionary now that you but it's not what anyone thought it would be. But you're doing what you love, and I really believe now I found my stride. I'm doing what I love. It's scary as heck every single day, um, but our company is committed to living the communication and conflict tools that we teach, living it out every day, and having that be real in the relationships. And we really can't control the rest.
Very cool. Very cool. So, how many years did you spend in Africa as a child?
A total of 11. I was 7 years in Zaire, where I told that first story, and then my family went back to Africa, to Botswana in the 80s, and I went to high school in Botswana, which at the time was the only functioning black democracy in Africa, and it was during the time when Nelson Mandela was still in prison in South Africa, and apartheid was the regime there.
Sure. Wow. Wow, that had to be an amazing experience to be growing up in a completely different culture. So, how much of doing that, growing up in a different culture, do you think influenced your view of how the world functions?
It was huge. It was terribly impactful because I grew up as an American, as a white male outside of America looking in, and as a minority. And so I didn't, people talk about white privilege, talk about, these different things. I grew up being a minority and still having that sort of, but it was a really different situation. And, but I didn't see myself as different. I was just one of the group. Um, and I think it also affected me because I was around a lot of conflict and a lot of casualties. Particularly in Botswana, terribly much violence, political violence, car bombings. I mean, I remember one day walking to school and there had been a car bomb the night before, and we walked past the shelled out car, and in an acacia of thorns was bits and pieces of body parts.
Oh,
All I remember is that, and then seeing a little polo shirt logo stuck through an acacia thorn on my way to school. So this idea, I think what really formed me was, why does conflict have to cause so many casualties? When I was brought up in a Mennonite family, which is, if you know about Mennonites, it's all about peace and nonviolence. And
right.
I was taught, turn the other cheek, don't ever hurt anybody. And yet I see this. And I just couldn't reconcile that. And so I think most of my life has been trying to figure out, how do you do conflict without casualties?
Right. Very interesting. So, as you grew up in that type of environment, did you ever find yourself I don't want to say drifting from your faith, but wondering whether or not the path of nonviolence, the path of turning the other cheek, was the wrong way to go? That there were.
Yeah, I did a lot because partly was because my natural personality is I'm pretty competitive, and I don't mind puffing up and getting that way, but the messages always were, don't do that, don't ever hurt anybody. um I remember one time when I was in fourth grade, I snapped, and there was a bully on the playground, and I tripped him on the way by when he didn't see it, and he fell on the edge of the concrete, broke his glasses, cut his eye, and had to get stitches. And
Oh,
it was way more than I intended. I was only intending to embarrass him in front of everybody, but instead I actually injured him. And then I kind of recommitted myself. I'm never going to hurt anybody, but I'm big. I'm 6'5", 230 pounds. So throughout my life, I had the ability that I could have used force and used physical to get what I wanted, but I chose not to. And so it forced me to develop other ways to get influence and to build relationships.
very cool. So when you were a little boy, 7 years old, watching that scene outside the window, um, what was this thing that struck you inside the most about what your father did?
He walked into the battlefield of conflict while upholding two really key principles. Or three, we're worthwhile, we're capable, and we're accountable. And he demonstrated that we can engage conflict while preserving dignity and while still solving a problem. It was simultaneously this schizophrenic who's having probably a paranoid delusional episode is worthwhile and capable of changing, and at the same time he's accountable for his behavior. It's not okay for him to throw chairs in the fire and burn up all our stuff. So my dad somehow held those two together at the same time, and I wanted to believe that that's possible.
That is really powerful. That is very cool. Your dad sounds like an amazing man.
Well,
Um,
it's not just about forgive and forget. That's not what dealing with conflict is about. It's about compassion and accountability at the same time.
right. Very. Yeah. It's just amazing that you got to see that and experience that at such a young age. So you head off to college, come back to the United States. Uh, do you remember what struck you the most about coming back and re-engaging in the American culture?
Oh my goodness, I do actually. Two things. Uh, First of all, I remember standing in a grocery store in the cereal aisle and looking up and looking to the left and looking to the right, and I was completely overwhelmed by hundreds of choices of cereal. I'd never even seen cereal, let alone knew. I mean, I'd maybe eaten oatmeal for breakfast, but cereal and all these choices. And I was immediately addicted to Lucky Charms. I mean, I couldn't get enough. And my parents hated it because it's sugared cereal. The other thing I remember was how scared I was to cross the street because I didn't know the rules of cars. And it would just scared me. And I would be hesitant. I wouldn't want to step off the curb. And my friends would laugh at me, and they'd say, "Oh man, I bet you were so scared of lions and tigers and all the stuff in Africa." And I was like, "No, I knew how to handle that. I wasn't scared of poisonous snakes or anything, but I don't know how to cross the street."
That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, and we arrived back in the U.S. on 4th of July, 1976, the bicentennial.
Oh,
And the first thing we did was go to a fireworks show. And all I did was bury my head in my mom's lap and cried. I was so scared. I had no idea what was going on.
oh my gosh. Yeah, that's such a different perspective than the rest of us who live here have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you came back and you went to school, you went into business. What drove those initial decisions to go down that particular path?
I've always been entrepreneurial. Again, that's one of the reasons why I specialize in personality work and personality communication because I'm so fascinated by the influence of our personality on the choices we make.
Hmm.
And I've been a natural promoter, they call it, where I love schemes. I mean, I owned, I don't know how many little schemes I've had in my life, and so I always had this dream that I was going to go make it rich and be a millionaire. And so I thought, well, naturally, go into business.
Hmm. Now,
I,
how did that jive with the lifestyle you were living in Africa as a teenager?
not well. My family was very frugal, not about being showy, is all about conserving, and that was not me. I always wanted to have as much as I could, and my mom always said, "Money burns in your pockets. You should be saving." And I would say, "Why should I save?" And she said, "Well, so you'll have money when you need it." And I said, "I got money when I need it." I just didn't get it the same way that she got it.
Uh-huh.
So I just had this entrepreneurial thing from it was kind of in my blood from the beginning.
Sure. So then you're at college, you're studying business, you're heading down the path of becoming the, the next Steve Jobs or whatever it was going to be at the time. Um, and a textbook scared you.
Yep.
Big econ textbooks scared you.
Yeah.
What made you think psychology?
Oh, yeah, it scared me because what I learned about myself in that moment is something my parents used to say all the time about me is I have lots of initiative, not so much finitiative. And what I saw in front of me was a steep climb, and I just didn't want to do it. So I was like, well, maybe psychology will be better or easier. The same thing was I did still have in my heart this desire to use my persuasiveness, my communication skills. I knew I was good with people, but I wanted to use that to benefit people rather than to take advantage of people. And I had approached business as a way to get lots for me.
Hmm.
And that was, I think, when in my life, some of the values my parents had instilled were starting to manifest, and I was starting to realize, that's not what it's about. And so psychology was really a different way for me to apply the same skills to help persuade people that they are worthwhile.
Very cool. Very cool. So as you went down this path then and shifted into psychology, did you ever have a sense of, crap, I really should have stuck with business so that I could go off and make the millions?
I suppose I still got that. I still scratched that itch on the side, though. I played tennis competitively. I applied for a patent on a shock absorber device for a tennis racket. So I was doing entrepreneurial things anyways, and that was fun. And so I think that kind of scratched the itch for me. And then my wife told me a long time ago. She said, "You're going to own a business someday." And so yeah, it still happened. Now I'm married. I've married both of those together.
Hmm.
Yeah. But
And how,
no, I don't think I ever regretted it. Now I look back and think, wow, I sure could have benefited from some of those business classes because I'm running a business now.
so if you had an opportunity to go tell that young man stepping off the plane here into America to go to college, what would you tell him?
Double major in business and psychology. Do the hard work. It's okay. Finish what you start.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So, in your work with organizations and individuals, you focus on doing um, conflict resolution without, oh, sorry, am I saying it right? Conflict resolution without casualties?
Well, we focus on conflict without casualties, not so
Conflict.
much resolving it or mediating it because we don't want it to go away. We think it's awesome. We just want to help people use it in a more creative, productive way.
Oh, say a little bit more about that.
Well, it's kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Conflict has a bad rap, and I of anybody knows that because I've seen all the casualties that can happen. I spent 5 years working with victims of domestic violence, and I've seen the conflict of casualties or the casualties of conflict, but I somehow believed it's not the conflict that's the problem. It's how we deal with it that is the problem.
Hmm.
And our our whole focus is that like when we teach communication skills, we teach it's not what you say so much, it's how you say it that
Hmm.
matters. With conflict it's the same. It's not the conflict but how you handle it. And so we've kind of looked at this distinction between drama, which is conflict gone bad,
Okay.
and compassion, which is conflict that creates. And compassion is a word I heard growing up, but I never really appreciated it. Compassion is not just, oh, my heart goes out to you, empathy, kindness. I'm going to like your cause on Facebook and I'm going to donate to the, Starving Puppies Fund. Um, Compassion means to struggle with, calm passion, to suffer with. And so
Hmm.
In conflict, the goal is to struggle with people. In drama, the goal is to struggle against people, where there's winners and losers. So it's all about how we struggle. And that's why compassion really has been a guiding, motivating theme for me.
Oh, that's a very cool way to look at that. So, um, you do this primarily with organizational work, but as a psychologist, how does how do you transmit these concepts into inner struggle and the conflicts that happen inside of us?
Great question. And this is one of the reasons why I'm in recovery as a psychologist. I'm a recovering psychologist, partly because I'm not in the traditional mental health world, but partly because the half-life of knowledge, psychology, is about 6 or 7 years. And so it's changing and growing all the time. And I think what I learned as a psychologist is way more beneficial in the outside world than it is in the therapy room.
Really?
And, you know, 50% of the population is going to have some diagnosable mental health problem at some time in their lives. Very few of them ever seek treatment. Most of them are going to work every day. They're dealing with disgruntled bosses. They're having conflict with their spouse. They need good, solid tools. So I use my psychology background to emphasize the emotional dynamics, the cognitive dynamics, the ways in which just why are people the way they are and why do they function the way they are? And I bring that expertise into the corporate training in a way that most leaders have never experienced when they get the typical corporate leadership training stuff. They don't get this level of depth and interpersonal expertise.
Sure, that's fascinating. So let me actually take you back, and I'm going to challenge a little bit this to put you back into to your college days, and ask you, when you made the shift from business to psychology, you had a mindset of what you were doing. Did you have people around you saying, "Oh my God, you're leaving business for psychology? Are you nuts?"
No, no, I did. And part of it was I'd only taken 2 economics courses and I was only a sophomore. So I hadn't gone that far, but there was a very important defining influence. It was a roommate that I had my sophomore year, and he idolized me for my people skills. He used to say, "Oh, Nate, man, you can get anyone to do whatever. You can manipulate people. You can do all this." And I got a big head, and I started believing it. And it was like, "Oh yeah, let me show you. I'm going to the dining hall. Let me show you how I can talk to anybody or whatever." And he played off of it, and I kind of started getting into my own head how good I was with people. Well, fast forward the clock. What I didn't know at the time is he was in the early stages of schizophrenia, and
No.
he was having paranoid delusions, and I was part of those paranoid delusions, and I got sucked into it. And so, right, it's a really sad story about what happened to him, but we were really good friends. And what I realized at that moment, once I kind of woke up, I was like, this is really dangerous. And you got to be really careful how you use your skills and what you do with your life. And so it wasn't people pushing me towards business or something. It was that experience saying, you have a gift, do something productive with it and be really, really careful.
That's awesome. Well, let's roll forward just a little bit. You've gone on. You've graduated. You got your PhD. Now you're in the world making money. Um, Pretty happy, and you're down in your basement with your buddies. In
Yeah.
those moments that you went from a successful lifestyle to,
Right.
hey, let's risk it all. What were you thinking?
Honestly, I wasn't thinking at all because it was all right here. There was no thinking going on. I was scared. I was excited. I don't think I've ever felt more alive in my life.
Hmm.
Um, the only thing that we had going for us was my wife had a different job with a different company that had insurance. Because it's insurance. I mean, these days, having health coverage is amazing. And we had a little family. We were having a new baby. So I was scared. I was excited. I've never felt so alive. And I felt like the four of us, it's survival mode. We're in this together and we have nothing but each other and we're all leaning on each other. And it was an amazing feeling. Just yesterday, we were at a staff meeting talking about rekindling that. How do we get back to that?
Hmm. So in the lead up to that moment in the basement where you guys made this group decision, was anything in your head or going on in your life that was saying, I need to change?
Yeah, I was not in a good space. Um, I had been promoted to vice president 3 years earlier, 2 years earlier, um, and was kind of at the top of my game in this organization. I was running the organizational consulting division of this company. We were doing well, we were growing, and I felt like I had a good relationship with the CEO. Um, but what started to happen was I felt like I was increasingly at odds with the company, and what we were doing in my division with clients was not that appreciated, and it was more and more exposing inconsistencies and hypocrisies within my own organization. And nobody likes that. Nobody likes to have their dirty laundry exposed. And I was not in a good space because I wasn't feeling like I was getting appropriately recognized for how hard I was working. I was starting to lash out and being more and more critical. And so I was getting sanctioned and censored. And so
Hmm.
then I didn't get what I couldn't see the forest for the trees, and just kept lashing out more and more and more and getting more and more frustrated and feeling like nobody appreciates how hard I'm working. I'm doing all these great things. And so I just had more and more power struggles all the time. And I started, as I learned more about my own personality and my own dynamics, I realized no matter where I go, I'm still me. And if I don't get this fixed and if I don't figure this out, I'm going to be miserable because I'm always going to be thinking it's about somebody else. And so I had to do a lot of work internally and emotionally and psychologically before I became ready to leave, because I knew I had to be going towards something, not running away from anything. And so that all had to happen before I left, before I could go.
Sure. So, you're a psychologist. So, how did you approach making those changes you needed inside of yourself? How did you go
Yeah,
about doing that and approaching that whole process?
you know what they say, healer, heal thyself.
That's
Um,
the question I'm asking. How did you do that, healer?
well, the model that we teach with personality is it's very precise about emotional issues. It's like Achilles heels that each personality deals with. My emotional Achilles heel was grief and loss, and I don't do well with grieving losses. And it could be loss of what could have been. That was my big one. I thought my trajectory was going to go like this, and it didn't. It could be real losses like relationships. My father died at that time.
Mm.
It could be loss of a plan, loss of time. You know, the schedule changed, and now I've just lost time. And I never grieved. I wasn't grieving the loss. Instead, I was blocking it and attacking everyone else for wasting my time and not appreciating me and blah, blah, blah. And so what I realized is I've got to grieve. And when my father died, I was really able to actually cry, not just cry for losing him, but crying for all the losses that I'd experienced that I never grieved. And instead, I projected them onto other people. So for me, it's grief and loss. And I know that about myself, and I know my triggers. It's different for different people, but that's what I had to do.
Huh, interesting. So, from the point where before you headed into that basement, and then you dove into the fear a few weeks later, were you happier diving into the fear or living in that point of lashing out at people in the corporate world?
I was so much happier because I wasn't afraid anymore. And I wasn't afraid of not being okay. I maybe was afraid of, can I pay bills next month? But I knew I was going to be okay. I mean, I could go get a job in a corporate world if I had to, but there was something super free about that. It also really helped me because the way in which things departed at my old company it was really bad. And it was not good. And they were trying to, you know, four of us from the same company leave on the same day.
Oh,
It doesn't look good for the company.
right.
Um, and so there was a lot of efforts on their part, I think, to undermine us and try to not give us severance and all this stuff. And so that was really ugly and messy. But I was able to kind of transcend it and not be resentful and be able to grieve that, and say this is a consequence of what happens. I accept it, I embrace it, and the only thing we can do is go forward and be the best selves that we can.
Very cool. So, how did, when you look back on that, how do you think making that decision to take that leap, how did it change you as a person?
I think it changed me because I really embraced on that day that there is no one else to blame, and there is it's not like you can do anything you want if you just apply yourself. I don't think that's true, because opportunity matters. But it really was about fully embracing what it means to be responsible for who you are, and responsible for your gifts and what you want to do in life. And I've had those little moments along the way that we've talked about, but that was the most recent big one, where it's about be fully responsible for you. It's not about anybody else.
Very cool. So, as a psychologist, I know you probably occasionally run into people who are looking to change their own lives, to be able to make that leap, or they're standing on the edge, trying to gin up that courage to
Yeah.
do that next thing, to follow what you've done, or to whatever it is that is their dream or their desire. What do you tell people in those situations? To Well, what do you tell them?
Yeah. Well, the two books that I've written are all about trying to get that message out there. The first one was called Beyond Drama, Transcending Energy Vampires. And it's all about recognizing and transcending the drama in our lives and in our relationships. And then the second one is called Conflict Without Casualties, How to Lead with Compassionate Accountability. And both of those books are full of assurances and kind of those self statements about what we can tell ourselves to help remind us at every moment we're capable, we are accountable, and we are worthwhile. And if we believe those three things and we act as if they're true until we believe them, it's amazing how we can get through really, really tough times. And if we embrace conflict as the struggle with instead of the struggle against, then we don't have to worry about getting rid of the struggle anymore. It's not about making life easy. It's about working together to create something amazing. And that can be incredibly freeing for people, because we have a lot of myths around conflict that we can just break down, and start struggling to create something amazing that is worthwhile, and that hurts so good at the end of the day.
Very cool. Very cool. So, as part of your advice, then, let's kind of make a hypothetical. If somebody's wanting to go down a path and the people around them are saying, no, you shouldn't go down the path, and inside somebody's saying, I need to go down that path. How do you advise somebody like that that's surrounded by people that are saying, oh, you shouldn't go down that path?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say follow your heart and trust your gut. And that doesn't mean don't do research, don't go in with eyes wide open, and don't be a naive. But what I would say is two things: is first, find someone that is your advocate, find someone that believes in you. We finally found a banker that believed in us. Now, they didn't loan us any more money than anybody else, but he believed in us, and he always said, I know you guys can do this. So find people that believe in you and are your biggest champions, because you need that confidence and courage. The second thing is transform your detractors into your supporters. Invite them to struggle with you and help you be successful instead of struggling against you by
Mm,
giving you advice and telling you what's not going to work. Because even the most jaded parent or uncle also has a lot of experience. And if they were to use that experience to help you instead, they could be part of the solution instead of part of the problem.
interesting. Great advice. I love that. Um, so you've certainly gone down some interesting paths in life. Everything from being in Africa and seeing true conflict in its worst form, to now living a very full life, following and pursuing your dreams of what you want to do and where you want to go. What, after you've had these type of experiences, if somebody says, what's the most important thing in life, what's your answer?
Oh, man. I would say the most important thing in life is to live fully into who you are. Don't try to be something for somebody else, and don't be limited by what you think you are. Um, every one of us has so much capability and so much potential to be and do and grow. And so live into who you are and who you're meant to be. Um, and if you don't know who you're meant to be, try things. get with people that believe in you, because they're a wonderful mirror for that. So I would say live fully into who you are.
That is beautiful. I love that. Um, I think actually we're going to start the wrap up right here because that's a wonderful, wonderful place to begin to wind down here. So if people want to know more about you or get in contact with you, what's the best methods to go about doing that?
Yeah, well, my name is Nate Regier, and you'll find me anywhere on the internet if you Google. Well, I don't know, anywhere. I hope you don't find me in certain spots, but um, my company is Next Element, and it's next-element.com. And that's where you can find out about my company and what we're doing. And I can be found on Twitter at NextNate, LinkedIn, Nate Regier, Facebook, Next Element Consulting. Any of those are fine. And I try to be accessible, and I'm happy to respond to personal inquiries on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or our website.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to get those links onto our website too. So Nate, this has been really cool. And I always end with one question. And that question is, what question did I forget to ask you?
Question you forget to ask me. You know what I thought you were going to say at the end is, what challenges are you facing now? Because we never arrive. There's always something. Like, what are my demons today? And
And
that's the one question: is now what are you facing?
we'll answer your question.
You know, today what keeps me up at night is I still deal with loss, and the biggest thing I worry about is, have I lost time? Could I have done something different to change the course of our company, to accelerate its growth, to provide better for my employees and my co-owners? I'm always asking, is there anything I could have done differently, and have I lost time? Because for me, time is precious, and spending it well is really important to me. So every day I grieve, and every day I look forward to making the most out of the next day and living into who I am.
Very beautiful. Nate, thank you so much for spending so much time with me today. And I hope your company continues to grow and continues to find great success.
Thank you, Shay. It's been a privilege.